concerning ourselves with. So the beginnings of foreign aid can be traced back to the 19th century, with the first main development of foreign aid being the Marshall Plan, and you would remember studying that in history, and the founding of the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Agency after and during the Second World War, respectively. Though aid began as a temporary diplomatic expedient, it has since then blossomed into a permanent component in relations between states, instituting a paradigm shift that the governments of more developed countries should help the governments of less developed countries. So the study for my dissertation for the impact of aid on economic growth was focused on Africa. So my research gap arose for this due to the previous studies only concentrating on sub-Saharan Africa. And the use of this term has been criticised and declared a pejorative term due to the fact that it refers to the South only by supposed conventions of demarcation and implies a sense of inferiority. Some argue the term is remnant of colonialism, which has consequently divided Africa into the European vision of uniformity, despite the undeniable fact that all 54 countries belong in the same continent. So if we look at the main aid arguments, which are the aid paradigms, if you would, so both of them are on severe ends of the spectrum. So on team pro-aid, we have Jeffrey Sachs, who fully backs foreign aid, believes it's the best thing ever. And then obviously his strongest critic is team no-aid, William Easterly, who is the complete opposite of Sachs and does not believe that aid works as most people believe, such as Sachs believe it to. So according to Sachs, with the right policies and key interventions, extreme poverty can be eradicated within 20 years. Dambisa Moyo, another economist in this area, states that we live in a culture of aid in which those who are better off subscribe both mentally and financially to the notion that giving aid to the poor is the right thing to do. So here we have the pro-aid arguments, some of them which I've touched upon. First quote is from Sachs, second one, we have a moral obligation to help these poor people. The big push and the poverty traps are theories coined by Sachs, which I'll go into, as is his focus on the Millennium Development Goals. So Sachs is an adamant believer in concepts such as the poverty trap, a theory whereby there are mechanisms in place in the said environment which cause poverty to persist, making it difficult for such countries to escape from. The implication regarding the poverty trap is that huge efforts are required to help countries out of this persistent trap, whereby a financing gap is responsible for. The method of promoting these countries out of such a trap is known as the big push theory. The theory is an argument for huge transfers and reforms with the purpose of attempting to tackle several socio-economic problems rapidly. The concept underpinning the big push theory is that the citizens of less developed countries are poor, so they dedicate what little income they have towards consumption, and therefore they can't save, and therefore they can't make investments, thus trapping them in this persistent cycle. Accordingly, the mass injection of foreign aid as part of the big push should break this cycle, and therefore having the potential to increase savings, and then materializing increased growth and increased prosperity. And then we have the 8 Millennium Development Goals, which Sachs really focuses on. The world has made significant progress in achieving many of these goals. Between 1990 and 2002, average overall incomes increased by approximately 21%. The number of people in extreme poverty declined by an estimate 130 million to 1. Child mortality rates fell from 103 deaths per year per 1,000 lives birth a year to 88. Life expectancy rose, and an additional 8% of the developing world's people received access to water. However, what's interesting is that progress has been far from uniform across all the countries. There are huge disparities across and within countries themselves. Poverty is greatest in rural areas, though urban poverty is also extensive, growing and underreported. No aid arguments include corruption and rent-seeking behaviour. So Svensson conducted a study on this, that increased aid can lead to increased corruption because of governments misusing it. Easterly states that we are just throwing money at countries with little regard to them as individual countries, that we're trying to make a one-size-fit-all. He also has theories of blank slate and convergence, which I'll go into. So economic convergence is an argument against aid to some extent. So the hypothesis is that the poor countries will be growing at a faster rate than the rich countries, and therefore, as a result, they will catch up to their richer peers. However, people like Sachs argue that there are things in place, such as the poverty trap, which hinder this. The blank slate theory is that the idea of development of low economic countries is inherently different from the process of us now developed countries that happened in the past. The US developed without Millennium villages across it, then why should we believe that Kenya cannot develop without them, for example? This brings us back to the idea that maybe we should be focusing on homegrown growth as opposed to foreign aid intervention. So can I just have a show of hands of who thinks aid is good? And who thinks aid is bad? Okay. Interesting. So the evidence suggests that there may be a conditionality requirement of aid, whereby aid will work better in a country with good policies and it won't work as well in a country with bad policies. That makes sense, right? Although there have been criticisms of this, Rajkam and Nak think that it follows a moral hazard problem, so the poor countries become ever dependent on it, being like, well, we'll just have the rich countries to bail us out if we use up all our aid money, and obviously that doesn't bring about sustainable growth and development. But an overwhelming argument in support of aid is the impact it has on health and development in terms of healthcare. So there are many examples of this, and even William Easterly admits that this is an area that has enjoyed many successes, such as the eradication of smallpox and the reduction of HIV and AIDS, amongst many others. So what did I find? Well, consistent with Easterly 2003, my research on the impact of foreign aid on economic growth for all 54 countries within Africa yielded very similar results. My sample period was from 1995 to 2005, as not many studies had researched more into the 21st century. And my results showed that a 1% increase in the aid to GDP ratio correlated with a decrease in economic growth of 1.73%. That's right, a decrease in economic growth. Whilst there are clearly causality issues to consider, it is apparent that even if aid is not doing anything at all, it's not really helping economic growth. Explanations of why this is the case are left open for debate. However, review of evidence and literature pertains that this occurrence can happen, such as rent-seeking behaviour and corruption, such as the previously discussed ones. Other evidence points towards the impact of aid being negative past a certain amount of threshold, but obviously these are areas which will require further study. So which approach should we take? Probably not our current one. Arguably, some may say that we have given more than enough money to eradicate world poverty, and the implication is that maybe we should heed some of Easterly's advice. No two countries are the same, and there will never be a one-size-fits-all approach. While society may strive to end world poverty through selfless contribution, the conclusions we may draw from this study indicate that this solution, while logical and heartfelt, sadly is detrimental, and careful reassessment of our methods of helping the poor needs to be done. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Quite provocative. Any questions for Lisa? Yes, here first.
I was just wondering if your research or your reading highlighted any theories or ideas for what we can do to help, so things like trade not aid, or if there's any expansion.
Well, there are theories that are such that we are actually, as in the developed world, are preventing the developing world from developing, because we're not opening up to like free trade. We have tariffs in place. To be honest, we don't treat them as well as we could, or as because we developed a lot of the time through free trade and not having barriers to entry and all that. But these days, lots of things are in place with that. And then you get a lot of times where aid is conditional, so they're given aid, but they're like, you have to buy our products. But, well, okay, great. So a lot of the things we are doing aren't helping them. Easterly says we should take a more marginal approach. So doing slowly, maybe, setting up little things as opposed to being like, here's £1 million, do whatever you want with it type thing. And trying to like transform it like that is just not going to work, so.
Thank you. Okay, a couple of hands up over there. So yes, please.
Yeah, you talk about obviously foreign aid, it's the whole point of it, but as was sort of highlighted almost by the first speaker today, there's a lot of problems in the UK, and again that's one of the arguments that's made against foreign aid, is the fact is we've got a lot of problems in our own country. Shouldn't we throw the money at that? Obviously yours is based on foreign aid, but have you got sort of half an opinion on that based on?
No, I
Sort of-
do. I mean, I don't agree with I don't agree with hardly any of UKIP's policies, but they did say that we shouldn't be increasing the foreign aid budget when we've got so much problems to do with poverty on our doorstep, which is a fair point. Like, what right do we have to tackle poverty abroad when we've got it here? We should probably try and focus on that first. So probably I would agree with them on that to some extent, and also from my findings, it's not really helping the way we're going about it, so maybe we should focus it more at home first.
Thank you. There was a third hand up over there first, but clearly we're very engaged with this one. So over there first.
So one of the things you said for why aid doesn't work here is the high levels of corruption.
Yeah.
So what did your research suggest is like something that we could do to kind of like solve that? Because even if we weren't giving aid, there'd still be lots of corruption and they'd still be in a poverty trap.
Yeah, well, a lot of my research actually found that most of the money that was being donated as aid, we weren't actually properly assessing the governments and sort of the politics of the country itself, so we were kind of just ad hoc giving it out. So obviously there should be more in terms of we should analyse the country first, like are they going to do well with it? I mean, there's the argument of the trickle-down effect where even if your government is corrupt, then if you give them money, eventually it will make it down to the masses. But obviously that isn't the case, so clearly more careful reassessment of the giving of aid has to be done with its recipients as well, I guess.
So even if you target countries which aren't corrupt,
Yeah.
how would you help those countries which are corrupt? Because what you're saying is we shouldn't give money to those countries
Yeah,
that
that's-
are corrupt. But then how do you help those countries anyway then?
I don't know. I'll tell you in 1 year's time after I finish my masters on this.
That's a fair enough response. And finally, just quickly,
So
sir.
I remembered your graph, which was trying to show a relationship between the developments after aid with the GDP.
Yeah,
growth.
yeah.
I noticed that the years in which you looked at it, there were a few years that highlight to me for certain specific countries in Africa, for
Mhm.
example, that were going through their own economic downturn. So is it fair to say that there was a relationship between the amount of aid that was given and GDP growth when they were already going through certain economic downturns?
No, like I totally get that. So that was what Easterly presented. Obviously there's a whole correlation does not mean causation. And no, it doesn't. Like clearly that's not the thing. But what he's saying is like, even though there may have been economic downturns as a result of business cycle and factors beyond our control, we were still giving them more money despite these uncontrollable factors. How does that make any sense?
So what my question was that did you examine what exactly they were giving the aid for? In
No,
those certain
because
situations?
like I did conclude my dissertation with something like obviously the limitation of my study is that I don't understand, like I haven't figured out why there are causes for increased aid despite decreased growth. I don't understand why the governments do that, and I don't understand why there's this correlation that the growth decreased despite the huge increases in aid. Obviously these are down to other factors which have to be researched more in depth, but I am looking forward to looking into these, so hopefully I can answer your questions in a year's time.
Lisa, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to invite you